Annyeonghaseyo, everyone. My name is Willy Renandia. I am a language teacher educator from Singapore, and I currently teach at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University. And thank you so much for joining our symposium on journal publication today. I've got 4 ELT scholars here from 4 different countries in Asia, and they'll be sharing with us their experiences as researchers, writers, editors, and reviewers of academic journals in our field. They will also be sharing some very, very useful tips for emerging scholars, those of you who are learning how to get published in academic journals and also in other publication outlets. Let me begin by introducing all 4 speakers, and they'll be speaking in this particular order. The first speaker is Betsy Gilliland. She is Associate Professor in the Department of Second Language Studies at University of Hawaii Manoa. She is co-editor of the Journal of Response to Writing, a very good journal, still fairly new. And she is also on the editorial boards of the Journal of Second Language Writing, Journal of Language, Identity and Education, and also TESL, electronic journal, TESL EJ. The next speaker is an esteemed professor from Korea, Eun-Sung Park. Currently, she is professor in the English department of Sogang University in Seoul, Korea. Her work includes articles in applied linguistics, language awareness, language and intercultural communication, language learning, language teaching research, and the Journal of Language, Identity and Education. The next speaker is Professor Supakorn Phoocharoensil. He is currently a teacher and language teacher educator at the Language Institute of Thammasat University, Thailand. He is also the chief editor of a very well-established journal called the Learn Journal. And last but not least, Cheryl Sheridan. She is an assistant professor at the Foreign Language Center at the National Cheng Chi University in Taipei, Taiwan. Her research into academic writing, multilingual researchers' publishing experiences, and national scholarly journals has appeared in the ESP Journal, Global Academic Publishing, Policies, Perspectives, and Pedagogies, and also in the journal called Written Communication. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now call upon the first speaker, Professor Betsy Gilliland.
Thank you, Willie. So I'm very glad to be here. So I, as a journal editor and as a frequent reviewer for journals, Willie has asked me to talk a bit about the submission and review process to journals. So I'll be talking specifically about policies from my own journal, the Journal of Response to Writing, but also more generally about academic journals. So the first thing to do before you can submit an article to a journal is to be sure that you're well prepared to submit your article. And every journal has different policies. So it's very important for you to read the guidelines that the specific journal you want to submit to has shared. There's always a page on their website that gives you a lot of details about what you need to do. And a few things to do before you submit your manuscript are the following. One is to blind your references. So you may have a citation or a note about who you are somewhere in your article, such as a reference to a work you've already published or to your thesis, or possibly your research was at the institution where you work. So you've named your university. In all of these cases, you need to make sure that you remove that reference. So change it just to author in order to make sure that the reviewers don't know who you are. Another is to do a very careful check for spelling and grammar, because different journals use different spelling rules. You need to make sure if you're submitting to a journal in the USA that it's American spelling. If it's a journal located in Great Britain, it's British spelling. And wherever the journal is, they should specify which spelling and grammar and punctuation as well. You may be surprised that British and American punctuation is different. Another is to really double check your references. Every journal has its own policies for references. Some follow standard policies such as MLA or APA, but others have their own house style. So make sure that you've made all of your citations aligned with those journals' policies. In addition, they may have requests for which fonts to use, how big the margins should be, what kind of line spacing, double or single line spacing, what format the headers should be as well. And finally, some journals want your tables and figures as separate files. Some journals say to put them at the end of your manuscript, and some journals say to put them in your manuscript at the same place where they should appear when it's published. So all of this before you're ready to actually submit. Then when you're ready to submit, there's a few things to do before you can actually upload your article. One is to create an author account. Unless you've published with this journal before, you'll be asked to fill in a lot of information. Some of it's things you would expect, your name, your email address, and some of it you may not be expecting. So one is the ORCID number. ORCID is an international identifier for publishing for authors. And the nice thing about ORCID is that it's unique to you. So even if you have a very common name like John Lee, you have your own ORCID number. And so journals, whenever somebody is looking for you specifically, they'll know that you're not the same John Lee as all the other academic authors with that name. Mm-hmm. Another is to note what your areas of expertise are. Journals like to have reviewers who have published in their journal. And so this is getting you in their list of potential reviewers as well. Then you may be asked to check some boxes, such as whether your paper has been approved or your project has been approved by the ethics board at your institution. Another is to guarantee that you're not submitting your article currently anywhere else, because that would be a big violation of expectations for academic publishing. And some journals will actually ask you to say how many words you have in your paper to make sure that you haven't gone over their limitations. Then you're finally ready to submit. So you'll upload your paper. You may need to enter metadata, such as the title, the keywords, or your abstract in separate text boxes. And you may also need to upload additional files. Some journals want a cover page, which is information with your name and the title, so that they have that as a document, even though that should not be included with your actual manuscript. They may ask you to recommend reviewers, which might be on a separate list of a separate piece of paper. And you may, if you have to submit your tables and figures separately, that may also be something to upload. Usually when you've done this, the journal's platform will generate a PDF file, and that's the proofs. So you want to make sure that it looks the way you expected it to. If it doesn't, you can go back at this point and make a change. But if it looks okay, then you hit submit and it's out of your hands. You are no longer in control of your paper. And so that's when it goes to the review process. Most journals will have an editor read your paper first. They don't want to, if they don't think it's appropriate for their journal, or if for some reason they think it's very low quality, they may reject it at that point. But a lot of articles then go on to reviewers. And usually the editor tries to find 2 or 3 reviewers. Usually people with expertise in the area. Sometimes it might be someone whose expertise is in the methodology you used or in the area. And the reviewers are often given about 6 weeks to 2 months to do their reviews, because we're all very busy people. they'll then tell the editor things that they think about the paper, both the good and the bad. A good reviewer will point out what they like about the paper as well as where it could be revised. If you receive a revise and resubmit, which means they are asking you to improve your paper and then send it back to them, be sure to do that. Sometimes scholars will look at a few negative comments from the reviewers and get very upset and not return the paper, even though the editor said, we'd like it back, revise it and send it back to us. Definitely do that, because that's a positive step. If, however, your article's rejected completely, either by the editor or after the reviewer feedback, think about where else you could send it, because it doesn't mean it's completely bad. It just means it's not right for this journal. But if there's useful feedback, make sure you take advantage of that feedback. These are several experts who have taken the time to give you advice on your writing. Working with editors. This is where it's important to me as an editor to ask for your patience as well. Sometimes authors will send their paper in, and then the next day they will email me to find out what the status of the paper is. Journal editors are busy people. We're full-time professors usually, and we don't have the time to check every 30 seconds if somebody has submitted something to our journals. So be patient. It's good to check the journal system to see what's happening with your paper, but unless you see something that's been sitting the same way for several weeks, please don't contact the editor every single moment you have a question. When you do write to the editor, be courteous, because it's in your best interest that the editor thinks positively about you. If you're rude, if you act impatiently in your email, you may upset the editor, and instead of getting your paper advanced further, you may get rejected at that point. So be positive, be courteous. Do follow up though, because as busy people, editors may not check their email as often as they could. And ask questions, because if you get feedback to revise and you don't know what you're supposed to do, the editor can help you understand and potentially think about how to revise your paper. If you need an extension, please ask the editor. So if your paper is given a revise and resubmit, you'll be told a date to send it back. Usually a month, maybe 2 months, something like that. If you look at your calendar and you realize I'm going to be super busy, my master's thesis or my PhD thesis is due at this particular moment, let the editor know. Just say, could I get an extension? I could send it to you by December instead of November. And the editor will probably say that's fine, because we'd rather, if it's a promising paper, we'd rather you take the time to do it well than rush and send us something that's not very well revised. And then finally, sometimes people decide they want to withdraw their paper for one reason or another. There's many different reasons, and I think we'll hear about that from other panelists. But do let the editor know, because if the editor sent you a revise and resubmit, they're expecting you to do something and send it back to them. And if you decide you want to send your paper somewhere else, or you don't want to publish, be courteous and let the editor know that you aren't going to continue working with them, so that they don't expect that your paper can be part of their journal in a few months. So yes, I recommend all 3 of these books. They're very helpful. The middle one, Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks, walks you step by step through the process of writing the article. The other 2 have very good advice about publishing as well. So if you're looking for things to read, you may want to get a copy of one of these books. Thank you.
That was an excellent overview of the publication process. Thank you so much, Betsy. Moving on now to the next speaker. I think Eun-Sung Park is ready now to share her screen. Eun-Sung.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm the second presenter. My name is Eun-Sung Park from Taiwan University. Betsy gave you a brief overview of the submission and review process. In my presentation, I'll be talking about something that you need to do before you submit your paper. So it has to do with how to choose the right journal for your article. This is probably the most important decision you will need to make as you prepare your first journal article. As Betsy emphasized, and you should know this already, even if you're a novice writer, you can send the same article to one journal, only one journal at a time. So submitting the same article to more than one journal simultaneously is not allowed. So you want to make sure and make a wise decision as to which journal you want to submit your article to. So in choosing the appropriate journal for your article, there is one important question that you need to ask. So the important question that you need to ask is my article a good fit for the journal? So what do we mean by this? In terms of good fit, there are three things that you need to ask yourself. One is the topic of the article. Does the subject of the article match the journal's specific focus? For example, if your article examines the effectiveness of corrective feedback, then you need to make sure that the journal you have in mind welcomes topics on corrective feedback. Second thing you need to consider is the target audience. And that has to do with what is the readership of the journal. Some journals aim classroom practitioners as their target audience, as opposed to some other academic journals that target mainly researchers and scholars. So you need to make sure that your article is relevant to the audience targeted by the journal. The third thing that you need to look for is the article type or the type of manuscript. So does this journal accept the manuscript type that I have written? So for example, if you have written a review paper, then obviously you need to submit it to a journal that publishes review papers. If you have a case report, then you need to submit it to a journal that publishes case studies, yeah? Some journals only accept empirical research papers, so you need to do your homework and find out what manuscript types are accepted by different journals. So you might be wondering, where can we find such information about different journals? Betsy also mentioned this, but the answer is quite simple. You just visit the journal website and you can find all the relevant information there. All respectable journals have their own website, so go visit their website, and under aims and scope or under about this journal, you will find the information about their topic coverage and target audience. And under author guidelines and submission guidelines, you will probably find information about the article types that they accept, and also other information about the word limit and how to format the article. The website also should include other important information, such as the editorial board, publication frequency, whether it's published 4 times a year, 6 times a year, and also information and abstracting and indexing, which I'll come back to in a few minutes. Now let's look at a journal webpage as an example. So this is from Language Learning website, and the URL is provided in red below. So you can look at some key phrases here. You can see that it's a scientific journal. It publishes research articles that systematically apply methods of inquiry, and it's concerned with fundamental theoretical issues in language learning. So you can see from these key phrases, there's no mention of practice or practitioners or such things. So you know that this is geared towards researchers, right? So if you have a manuscript that's practice oriented, this journal is not a good fit for your article. Let's look at another journal. So the title of this journal is Language and Education. You can see it actually on top here. The title of the journal suggests a very broad topic coverage, yeah, but that can be quite misleading. If you actually read the description carefully, it says here, and it's written in fine print, so I'll read it for you. The remit of language and education, however, does not extend to modern foreign language education, that is modern foreign languages or English as a foreign language. So what this is saying explicitly is that it does not accept papers on EFL teaching, yeah? But because of the title, Language and Education, you might be misled to thinking that this journal would accept EFL teaching, articles on EFL teaching, but That's not the case. And if you do submit an article on EFL teaching, then what will happen most likely is that the editor will reject your article without having sent it out for review. So what we call desk reject. It'll be just rejected by the editor beforehand because the topic does not fit the scope of the journal. You don't want that to happen to your precious article, do you? All right, so let's look at another one, last one, language teaching research. Here, it says here that the journal welcomes studies dealing with the teaching of languages other than English. So you can, if you did a study on the teaching of modern foreign language, like the teaching of Chinese or Korean, this is probably a good journal to submit to because they welcome those articles. You can also see that it says that it welcomes papers, or the paper should have clear pedagogical implications. So when you submit to this journal, you know that you need to have clear pedagogical implications. So any kind of classroom-based study, with clear pedagogical implications would be a good fit for this type of journal. As you can see, most, if not all, journals in our field have their own journal website where you can find most of the information you need. Now, let's assume that you have found a journal that is a good fit for your article in terms of scope, topic and scope, and also the type of article. There is also another important question that you need to consider. And this might sort of come as a surprise to you, but the question is the journal worth my time and effort? As a novice author or researcher, you're probably just really eager to publish your work. So this might be something that you haven't really thought of, And that's why I've included this question here. Not all journals are created equal. They differ in terms of reputation and prestige, how the journal is regarded by peers and colleagues in our field. In terms of turnaround time, the turnaround time is the time it takes from submission to decision, and journals differ in terms of their acceptance rate and rejection rate. If your purpose is to just get published, period, then you probably want to submit your article to a journal that has a high acceptance rate. But one important information that novice authors tend to overlook is that publishing in a journal is often linked to hiring, reappointment, and promotion. So ideally, your publication should help increase your chance of securing an academic position if you are in the job market. Or if you already have a position, secured a position, then your publication should count towards a reappointment and promotion. I mean, after all, it takes a lot of time and effort to write up a paper, right? So you want to make sure that it counts. So one way to make sure that to check if the journal is reputable is to look for the bibliographic and citation information. So these three databases are different databases that journals are listed in. So I don't know if you're familiar with these databases, but and in the US, it's probably not as important. But this is quite important in Korea and also in Asian countries because universities in Korea tend to rely on the indexing quality of the journal. For example, at my university, Sewang University, a journal that's listed in SSCI, that stands for Social Sciences Citation Index, a journal that's SSCI listed are regarded as top-tier journals that are really prestigious. And of course, there are several problems with this type of evaluation, but we're not going to go there. The fact is that universities in Korea, and I believe in many other Asian countries, religiously follow this ranking style. So if you publish in an SSCI-based journal, index journal, that's top-notch. If you publish in a Scopus index journal, that's really good too. They are prestigious too. And I have also listed here KCI, which you might not be familiar with. But each country often has its own indexing database. And KCI is the Korea Citation Index, which has a list of high-ranking journals published in Korea. And I know that different countries, like Malaysia has a similar index with their journals, Just to give you an idea of how the journals are distributed in the KCI database. According to the National Research Foundation of Korea, there are more than 5,000 academic journals in Korea, published in Korea. And if you look at the distribution, about 2,000 journals, more than 2,000 journals are KCI indexed, yeah? But more than 3,000 journals are not indexed in KCI list. So that means that if you decide to publish your precious work in the non-indexed journal, that will not count toward that will do nothing for your career path, yeah? So you want to make sure that you publish in a KCI index journal. So this is from AsiaTEFL, the Journal of AsiaTEFL. And it has all the important points I've addressed in this presentation. You can see that the manuscript type that they accept include research articles, reports, and book reviews, yeah? And the scope, the coverage is concerned with the teaching and learning of English, especially in Asian context. So you can see that they prefer articles about ELT in Asia. And in terms of indexing, the journal is indexed in Scopus, yeah? This journal is also KCI listed. So you can rest assured that an article published in this journal will contribute favorably towards your career path. So to wrap up, do look out for this type of information when you choose a journal to publish your first valuable, precious article. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Eun-Sung. That was really, really a very important topic, choosing the right journals for your papers or for your manuscripts. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to move on now to the next speaker, a very experienced language teacher educator, and also chief editor of a very important journal in Thailand called The Learn Journal. Ajahn Supakorn, please.
Hi, everyone. What I'm going to share with you is 5 common reasons why manuscripts are rejected, right? So, when you have your manuscripts ready for submission, right, you can also take all of this into your consideration. The first reason, right, incompatibility with the journal aim and scope, right? Sometimes, your manuscript is very good and is very new in the field. It yields some interesting result, but it's get rejected outright just because it doesn't fit the aim and scope of the journal that you submitted, right? So my tip is that browse through the article previously published in that journal, right? So for example, if you are interested in submitting your manuscripts to Journal of AsiaTEFL, right? You can explore the articles published in that journal, right? And see whether there are any articles that are similar to what you are doing, right? If they accept and they publish the articles that are related to the topic that you want to do, you might feel more comfortable submitting your manuscripts there. But you have to be careful, right? Because, different journals have different beliefs and different concepts. For example, if your study concerns second language acquisition of English vocabulary, for example, and you submit it to journals like Asian Englishes or Journal of World Englishes, right? It's very likely that your manuscript would get rejected right away because, the journals and your topic subscribe to different beliefs, right? Something like that. So, this is the first thing that you need to study carefully before you submit, right? The second one, some topics are outdated or obsolete, right? So something that you think might be interesting might be too outdated, right? So explore recent articles in the journals in your field, right? For example, if you want to do something about error analysis, that might be outdated, right? Even though your study reveals some interesting findings, right? Looking at student errors, L2 learners errors at sentence level might be not very interesting right now because the framework is quite old, right? 1980s, something like that. So my suggestion is that make some observation on the current trends in that particular area or subdiscipline that you are interested in. For example, SLA, ELF, corpus-based language study, and so on and so forth, right? Try to look at, the current topic. For example, if you want to do something about corpus-based language study, the current trend might be something related to word list formation, right? People from different ESP fields try to develop their own word list, right? Or maybe they are looking at lexical bundles, right? To follow Douglas Biber's framework, something like that. So, make sure that, the topic is not outdated. The topic is, trendy enough, right? Otherwise, it's going to get rejected outright by the editor. Number 3, this is very important. Many novice researchers, novice authors might overlook this one, right? Poor language quality. This might lead to desk rejection as well, because, some people think that it's okay, right? This is my first draft, and, they are very confident in their language competency. But, because, right, many writers do not speak English as their mother tongue, right? Sometimes, when they write articles, maybe there are some minor grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes, or punctuation mistakes, or even word choice problems, right? So this is very likely that manuscripts with poor language quality could be rejected, or even if it were sent out to reviewers, the reviewers might be upset, or maybe, sometimes, the poor language quality may affect the content, right? Maybe, what you are trying to say might be very confusing, or, might be obscured by the language that you are using. So it's recommended that all manuscripts before being submitted to any journal should be or must be carefully edited or proofread by professional editors. By the term professional editors, it means this can be a native speaker of English, or anyone like your colleague whose English competency is excellent, and they are going to give you some useful advice on not just grammar, but maybe word choice, organization of the ideas, right? So I think that you can also ask your colleagues or ask anyone in the field to have a look, right, and check the language quality, right? I think right now there are some service providers who may help you with this, right? But make sure that they are not going to charge you too much, okay? So this is very important, right? Some people may believe that that's okay, this is my first draft. I submit it to a journal, right? And then once it gets accepted, I can revise the content and I can find someone to edit that. Don't do that. That's going to be too late, because you won't have any second chance, right? Make sure that your manuscript is error-free. Now, the 4th common reason, acceptable research design, right? The research design that you employ doesn't need to be entirely new, right? You don't need to use entirely new method, yeah, even though it's an advantage, right? But this is not always expected, right? But make sure that your design follows the research conventions, right? It conforms to the standards in that particular area of study. For example, if you are doing an experimental study, you want to investigate the effectiveness of your teaching some particular new teaching method, right? And once you want to measure effectiveness, you should have pre-test and post-test scores for the comparison. If you have only post-test score, this is going to devalue your research design. Or if you are doing something like you are looking at the frequency of some words or some adjectives in the corpus data, right? Maybe, when you make a comparison, it's conventional that, especially, if you are dealing with enormous corpus, right? You have to use normalized frequency, something like that, or maybe use something that's, frequency per million, right? Because, this is the standard or the norm of corpus-based study, something like that. So, my suggestion is that try to read a lot, right? Read as many papers as you can in the particular field that you are interested in and try to follow the norms, right? Your research design should be sound, should be acceptable enough, right? Because, you know, I think this is the first thing that most editors look at, right? If the research design is weak, for example, another example is if you want to do something like quantitative study, but you don't use any inferential statistics, right? This might be bad, and this might be a reason why your work will get rejected outright. Okay, the last one, inadequate discussion. This is a classic reason why a paper could be rejected, right? Most of graduate students or novice researchers fail to discuss the findings effectively, right? They present the result very well in tables, in figures, but you know, maybe they don't know, or maybe they don't know how to discuss the findings, right? Try to make some connection between what you have found, between what is shown in your data, okay, with the previously reviewed theories and studies. And you know, make sure that, you know, when you want to make a claim, okay, you need some strong support from well-known scholars, from well-cited papers, seminal studies, right? Because, you know, when you do so, this will increase your paper value, right? For example, you have found something interesting, you have found some interesting results, right? And, you know, in order to convince people of your own claim, right, citing well-known scholars in the field would be very necessary, right? So, you know, make sure that your discussion is good enough, right? Your discussion, and, you know, it involves your own critical viewpoint, okay?
Very, very good advice. 5 reasons why manuscripts are often rejected. Ladies and gentlemen, the last presenter is Sheridan. We are saving the last for best, the best for last, not the last for best. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Sheridan from Taiwan.
All right, thank you so much. So all of you have really covered a lot of what I'm going to talk about in different ways. And I'm focusing on some research that I've been doing in Taiwan on national journals, humanities and social sciences journals that are published by entities in Taiwan. And I'm interested in this because a lot of research on scholarly publishing paints a pretty negative picture of these small national journals as poor quality or publishing inconsistently. And so many policies, as has been referred to here, are pushing researchers to publish in international, so-called international index journals. But at least in Taiwan, the government here has, we also have these pressures, but they've also put a lot of effort and time and resources into national journals and the national citation indexes here. So I was pretty curious about why researchers are submitting their work here and what's happening there. And so it might be something that you're interested in too, to see why you might consider publishing in these types of journals. So I interviewed 14 people in different disciplines in the humanities and social sciences, and I found 5 basically reasons, forces, and influences that give them, you know, why they publish or why they submit their papers in these journals. The first one, the most common one, which is not a big surprise, is that they've been rejected by so-called international journals. And so they turn to a national journal. But there are 4 other reasons that are also pretty common. They're looking for journals that they feel they would have a chance to get published in, but also the ones that are in citation indexes, particularly like the Taiwan Social Science Citation Index or the Taiwan Arts and Humanities Citation Index. And also time pressure. There's a perception, somewhat true, that turnaround time is shorter at these smaller journals and national journals. So if they're under pressure to get promoted or have their, you know, regular review of their work, that they can get something in more quickly. The other one is suitability, and this is especially among more experienced researchers. They're looking for particular local audiences to publish their work. They're not as concerned about, at that point, about getting into highly ranked journals, but they want they're more mature in their work, and they want it to be more locally read. And then the last one is relationships, and this has to do maybe with mentor-mentee relationships, or colleague-colleague relationships, colleagues wanting to support their colleagues who are editing the journals. I've done a survey on editorial board members at some humanities and social sciences journals to find out what they think about authors' performance during the process. And so this was distributed to editors and editorial board members of 75 journals, and 76 completed the survey. And they were asked to rank the reasons why articles are rejected, first at the desk reject stage, and then also during the peer review stage. And these reasons are based on Thrower, who wrote an article about why I'm going to reject your article. And so you can see, again, these are editors in Taiwan. This is very, supports everything that we have been saying here already today. Unsuitable topic is the most common reason that a paper is rejected. So not fitting with the journal's purpose. The next one, major methodological flaws, as also has been mentioned here. At this stage, if there are big methodological problems, there's really nothing that can be done through the peer review process. And again, as Betsy was talking about, the format and style requirements, if this is probably referring to manuscripts that are not following the sections, the way that the journal typically organizes the paper into different sections, and also the more, and maybe the way that stance or approach to the research topics, along with the nitty gritty, style, APA style or whatever. Again, lacking originality is an issue. They want papers that are making some kind of new contribution to the research. And poor language use is mentioned, but language is not necessarily it's not necessarily going to kill your chances at getting published. Plagiarism, and there are some other issues that come up at this stage. Next, I'll talk about the reasons why papers are rejected during the peer review stage. And here you can see that unsuitable topic is way down the list because the unsuitable topic papers have already been rejected by their editors. So the methodological problems and originality problems have moved up into peer reviewers' reasons. And then otherwise it gets into data, how it's presented, and enough data, the proper kind of data, and then plagiarism. And you can see that for the peer reviewers, language issues are way down at the bottom as far as reasons for rejection. So when asked to list several reasons that and shortcomings in authors' revisions and responses, editors and peer reviewers or editorial board members gave a lot of different reasons. I've organized these into 5 categories. First being revision issues, not revising completely or giving incorrect revisions because they're misunderstanding the comments from the reviewers. Then revision report problems come up quite a bit. Authors are not responding fully or not clearly, and they perhaps lack organization. And interestingly, the third common issues were related to emotion. So being too defensive, responding emotionally, and not knowing when to challenge or not to challenge the reviewers. And then other issues, timing, it was very annoying for if authors don't return their revisions on time. So even though the editors are complaining about authors' performance, they also see that they try to support them. They think that you know, these journals need papers, they want papers, they're in the business of publishing papers. So they do try to find ways to support authors, maybe, you know, not officially, but for example, they look for sympathetic reviewers. They use guanxi to recruit colleagues who would be friendly and dependable and understand the needs of the journal. They also want to provide revision opportunities. So, you know, recognizing some potential, they can give more time if you want to, you know, again, like ask for an extension and do even more rounds of reviews might be an option. They try to encourage authors to push through the difficult process of revision so that they can really finish, because if a journal has already invested this time in your paper, they really want you to finish it and get it in so they can have it published. And throughout this communication with the author and between the author and the editor is very important, and to demystify the review process. And also they like to be able to provide some editing support if they can. Okay, so they were asked how much they agree or disagree with how much authors learn through the process of peer review. And you can see that overwhelmingly the editors and editorial board believes that authors can learn through this painful process. So I think it's important to realize that, you know, it might be painful, it might be difficult, but editors do see authors making progress as they go through the process. And on pretty much all of those areas of ways that you can get rejected are things that you will learn through the process. So I'd like to conclude and just this actually kind of reiterates a lot of what we've been saying today. I would suggest that national journals might be a good option for your manuscript. Small journals do need good submissions, and there are good small journals that are in different indexes and not in any indexes. Really depends on what you need to do. But again, research your journal to be sure it's a good fit for your manuscript. I think that's the biggest lesson today. You want to match the topic, the approach, and the article structure. And when you're responding to feedback, read the review reports very carefully and respond to all of the feedback from the reviewers and the editors. And remember to be calm and collected, respond professionally and not emotionally. So I will leave it there.
Yes, also very important to be patient. Like Betsy
Yeah.
said early on, I mean, the editors who need to be patient, and the people who submit their papers also need to be patient. Let us now have a discussion about what we just discussed together in terms of journal selection, in terms of the kind of things that are commonly the reasons why papers are rejected. Maybe first off, let me ask the two editors here, do you enjoy rejecting or accepting manuscripts? This is for Betsy and Supakorn.
Well, if the question is, do I enjoy it? No, I actually feel I always feel sad when I have to reject something, because I know that the author did go to a lot of work to create the document. And sometimes it's pretty simple, just saying, this is actually a pretty good paper, but it's not something we publish. Okay. Journal of Response to Writing, if it's not about responding to writing in some form, we won't publish it. We've had wonderful submissions about teaching writing, about analyzing learner errors, but if it isn't connected to responding to writing, we don't accept it.
Yeah, for Learn Journal that I'm the chief editor of, right? To be honest, right, every week I tend to reject a lot more because, you know, we have received a lot more manuscripts, you know, since we have been indexed in Scopus, right? But, you know, sometimes, you know, I agree with Betsy because, you know, some manuscripts, maybe they are very good, but, you know, they should be submitted to some other journals. For example, last week I got some manuscripts about, you know, pure linguistics, and it has no implications to English language teaching or TESOL at all. It's like, you know, linguistic communication between humans and animals. So something that's not within the scope of the journal. So it must be that's rejected, something like that.
Okay, this is for Eun-Sung. Very good answers. You know, non-indexed journals, Eun-Sung. There are many out there. You know, some are not as good as the others, but there are really some good non-indexed journals out there. And also taking into account that writing, publishing takes, you know, time. It may take 5 years, 10 years, especially for people, you know, who want to build a career in writing. Wouldn't you say that it's actually not a bad idea for people to publish in those journals, non-indexed, with lower rejection rates? Eun-Sung, would you, is that something that you, if you have a new faculty member, for example, joining your university, would you, is that the kind of advice would you give to that person?
Well, for a new faculty member joining our university, I would actually advise against publishing in non-indexed journals, but
no choice.
for a fresh graduate, PhD who needs the practice, and you know, for them, I think it's okay. It depends on your purpose and where you are in your career path right now. If you have to be reviewed for tenure and reappointment and so on and so forth, you probably don't. I would advise against publishing in non-indexed journals. Unless you're the faculty in your department really know the journals. Like reading in a foreign language, I know is an excellent journal, but that's not really indexed in those databases, right? But our faculty kind of know that. So I think there is a way we can sort of take that into consideration. So those journals are okay, but just to be on the safe side. I mean, tenure and promotion, that's big stuff.
Very important.
It's very important, So I would actually advise against that. But you're right. Even the non-indexed journals, I mean, we have different categories. Some are really good journals, but some are really predatory journals that, you know, don't really deserve your time and energy. So you have to do your homework, and you have to really look out at all the different journals and see what kind of reputation it has in the field.
Cheryl, would you advise people to write book reviews, for example, especially those people who have been, you know, experiencing a lot of rejections? Is something like writing a book review a good way to, you know, to build somebody's competence and expertise in academic writing?
I know that in the US, when I was doing my PhD, a lot of our professors really encouraged PhD students to do book reviews because you need to read a lot anyway. So it's a good chance to do that. Where I am now, it doesn't count. It can be a supporting, it could be a supporting manuscript in your package, but and it can also, you know, also expand your professional identity. It can, you know, do other things.
In your presentation, or based on your data, you mentioned about the importance of topic. If your topic is not, you know, sort of suitable, then chances are, you know, it may get rejected. But there are different ways of looking at topics. The way I understand it, some topics are classic. They've been there for a long time, and they will always be important. But it's probably the kind of methodology, the kind of theoretical framework that you will need to, you know, keep updating, so that you may be looking at the same, you know, issue, for example, on motivation, for example, but you need to look at it from a different angle, from a different theoretical perspective. Is that something that you would recommend to people who have been, you know, doing research in the same area for many, many years, but the theoretical framework may be updated. It's not just a topic, but it may be the theory behind it that needs to be updated.
I suppose, I mean, the point is that you're making a fresh contribution to what's been done before. So if looking at it from another theoretical framework is, going to get you there, then that's a good idea. One thing I've noticed, though, sometimes it seems like people are playing like filling in the boxes. It's like, okay, I have a topic. Okay, now I need a theoretical framework, and then I'll just do this theoretical framework, and then I'll do it this framework, and then I'll do this framework, and you're just kind of regurgitating what you've been doing, just looking at it in slightly different ways. If you're skillful, and then you can do that, I think. But definitely, I think the point is you're trying to make a new contribution, and whichever way you go around doing that is what needs to be done.
Yeah, good point. Now, this is a question. The next question is for everyone. The back and forth between the reviewer or the editor and the person who submitted the manuscript. Do you always have to address every single thing suggested by the reviewers? Or is there a wiggle room for writers? This is important for young writers, for junior writers, because sometimes they feel that they have to address every single thing suggested by the reviewers, although the suggestions may actually clash with their own beliefs or the theoretical framework that they're using.
Yes, you have to take it into consideration, but no, you don't have to make those changes in your paper. One of the things on one of Cheryl's tables was about the response to the revisions. And so something I didn't mention in my presentation is when you do revise your paper, the editor expects you to make a list of the changes that you made in response to the revision feedback. And you can choose if it seems it's not compatible. Sometimes reviewers will say things just because they think it might be fun, but it's totally taking your paper off in a different direction. And so if you don't want to, you have a good reason for not doing it. Not that you don't want to do it, but that you know that it's not appropriate for your paper, then you can say that. The reviewer suggested I do this. I didn't because, and here are my reasons. If you don't do that, editors won't be very happy. But you can justify why you didn't make a recommended change.
Good point. Yes. Eun-Sung, what has been your experience? Do you always agree with the reviewers, or sometimes you say, nope, I'm not going to change?
I try to agree, but sometimes you just have to, you're the person who knows the study really well. Sometimes the reviewers, of course, they are experts, but they don't really follow your study, or they look at it from their perspective, which could be very different from yours. So I very politely, like Cheryl said, you have to read professionally and respond professionally, not emotionally. So very politely acknowledge that he or she has a good point, but also mention that you couldn't include this here because of blah, blah, blah. If you think that the review has a good point and you might want to, you say you can address it in the limitations or future studies or something like that. That could be a way to go about it. Yeah.
Okay, but sometimes, this is for Ajahn Supakorn, sometimes the suggestions are good, but if you follow the suggestions, it will take you forever. In that case, would you probably, okay, nice suggestions, I'll take it, use it as a basis of my revision, but I am then going to send it to another journal. Is that a strategy that you might want to?
Right. As an author, sometimes, the reviewers' feedback is very good, right? But, maybe it's quite hard to change. Or maybe, some reviewers, they are not from, the field. For example, I once submitted my manuscript to one Scopus-based journal, right? But I think one of the reviewers is not, in our field. It's not in ELT or applied linguistics. So, they comment, they gave me some comment, about research methodology in general, which is very good and very acceptable. But sometimes, when it comes to our field, for example, when we talk about ungrammaticality in language learning, we usually mark it with star. But this reviewer say, why do you have to mark it with star? This is not common, something like that. But it's common in our field, so we know for sure that this guy might not be the best for this. But you can communicate with the editor, right? That's my suggestion. Yeah, talk to the editor.
Good. Yes, I think we have had a very nice discussions on the topic of journal publication. Now, closing statement. If you have one or two, tips for, some of the best tips that you could give to emerging authors or writers, what would those tips be? Just limit to one or two, yeah? Based on your extensive experience as a writer, as a researcher, as an editor, as a reviewer. Okay, anyone can start. So this will be our closing. Yes, Cheryl.
I think it's important to realize that it is okay to communicate with the editor most of the time. Different journals have different cultures.
Yes.
And I think different national cultures also impact the way that journals are run.
Yes.
So know your journal, know the people behind the journal if you can, and maintain your confidence. You've written this paper, you're an expert in what you're doing, so have confidence to communicate when you think it's necessary.
And when you do it nicely, yeah? When you communicate
for
with
sure.
the editors.
Don't call up and complain. Editors have told me that they're really outraged that people call up and actually complain.
Oh, they do call. Okay.
Yes, on the phone.
Okay.
Anyway, don't do that.
Yes, other panel members, please. Anyone? Eun-Sung?
I would say do your homework, go visit the journal webpage, read the articles published in the journal to familiarize yourself with the journal, and then make sure that your article is a good fit for that target journal.
Great tips. Yep.
Yeah.
Next.
My tip is that do not give up, right? Everyone has ever, got rejected, right?
Yes.
So, try to take into account the reviewers' comments, right? And this is going to help improve your quality of the manuscript, even though you want to submit it to another journal, right? Receiving and conforming to the reviewers' comments in the first journal will help improve a lot the quality of your paper. And this increases the chance to get accepted by another journal.
There's a Facebook group called Reviewer
Teacher
Number
Voices?
2.
No, I'm sorry.
No. Well, yes, that's a wonderful group. I was actually
Voices.
going to say one for humor purposes. Reviewer 2 must be stopped. And it's joking about academic publishing. And one of the things somebody posted was a meme that said, if you never submit, you won't get bad feedback, which is true. But if you never submit, you'll never get published either. So you have to take that into consideration, that you can go along feeling good about yourself, but never get your article published. Or you can toughen up and realize that there will be difficult feedback, but if you address it and you think about it carefully, you will actually get your article published.
Good, excellent tips, everyone. And ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me again pleasure to thank the panel members, Cheryl, Sheridan, and Eun-Sung Park, and Betsy Gilliland, and also Ajahn Supakorn Phoocharoensil. I hope you have found the discussions and the presentations useful. Thank you again. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.